back to Read and Profit. Many of us will have made some New Year's resolutions about making 2010 a better year financially. But the unfortunate truth is research continues to find that many women are just not that into understanding their finances or indeed managing them, despite their increasing independence. But in Flirting with Finance, the authors are able to turn some of the basic principles like compound interest and capital gains into an amusing and accessible finance lesson by talking about things women do get, like dating, health and fashion. I spoke with Annalie Knight about her mission to empower other women to take control of their finances and that female finance switch-off factor.
Even anecdotally, we realised our friends, if they're sitting around and talk turns to finance, people's eyes just glaze over. A lot of women just don't find it interesting. They just find it boring or maybe a bit intimidating. And then the Women Understanding Money report came out about a year and a half ago by the Financial Literacy Foundation in Australia, and it said that 52% of women find talking about money stressful or overwhelming, and that 25% of women have absolutely no savings for retirement. So that was really the moment we thought, okay, it's not just our observation. This is something that's affecting women right across Australia, and it's not, finance really isn't that difficult. There's some basic principles and concepts that if you don't learn about them, you might never know about them. And because some women don't find it so interesting, they don't make an effort to learn it, and then they let other people around them make those decisions on their behalf.
Do you think we're getting to the bottom of why women feel like this about money and their finances?
Did a lot of research as part of the book, which we've included in the first chapter. And I think a lot of young women today, we have such a high level of independence, we forget how far we've come just in a few decades. One woman I spoke to is a senior academic now. She was an undergraduate student in the 70s, and she had her own store card at a shopping centre, at a department store, in her own name. And when she got married, the store cancelled her card and she had to reapply for a new card with her husband's permission. Women couldn't even get mortgages in their own name. They struggled to get a mortgage in their own name in the 1970s. And there was a legal case actually that wasn't settled until the beginning of, I think it's 2001 that it was settled, called the Pretty Widow case, that went right to the High Court. But what the premise was, one of the lower court judges gave this woman, her husband died, and they were awarding damages through an insurance claim, and they reduced her damages by 25% because she was fairly young and pretty and had a good chance of remarrying. So that was eventually overturned, but you know, just to realise that these attitudes are entrenched in the banking system, the legal system, and even social attitudes, that's really a bit of a disadvantage, that there's this idea somewhere in the background that men will support women, and it hasn't completely gone away.
And so the aim of the book then was to have a bit of fun with money and make it information more accessible to women. Tell us how you achieve that in the book.
What we decided to do is borrow the magazine format. So we've got a horoscope section in there which runs through, you can find out what your financial zodiac is. So you look at the excuses that you make to yourself about why you haven't started investing yet, and then you can find out what your horoscope is and how you can solve that, so just overcome that, because we find procrastination's often one of the biggest hurdles for women in making that next step. We also compare all the different investment types to different types of men. So we've got the blue chip stock, who's a bit like a dentist or a GP who's worked hard to build his reputation. We've got the speculative stock, who's like a guy who sells advertising. So we go through, and just to make it a bit light and a bit of fun with something that's traditionally seen as quite dry and boring. We have an economies like the fashion industry, and we say that interest rates are a bit like shifting hemlines, that you know the fashion winds go up and down, and that the director of the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, is like the editor of Vogue, who just says higher or lower with a big team of people behind them doing the research to make that decision about what should happen. So, you know, and obviously, so there's those fun ideas around it, and then interlaced with that, we have explanations of what the ASX, you know, what the stock exchange is, what the All Ordinaries is, and how it works. We show historical graphs of where interest rates have been over the last 30 years, because a lot of people don't realise that in the late 80s interest rates were up to about 17 or 18%, and they've just been at 3% obviously, so things are very changeable, and the US dollar can, you know, vary from 50 cents to $1 and has done so over time. So just giving that historical context for people as well, and explaining some of the terminology along with sections that are a bit more light and fun to keep people turning
one of the criticisms that some people would have of the book is that while you might pitch it to independent, successful, intelligent women, really you've dumbed down concepts, and some people would say it's almost condescending. What do you say to that kind of criticism?
Yeah, we've heard that a couple of times, and I sometimes compare it to how a men's book might be taken, and I think if a book was written for men with the very basic fundamentals of finance that was using sporting or car analogies, then it wouldn't be criticised in the same way. But if you look at the magazine format, we've got a quiz as well there for budgets. You walk into any newsagents and you just see that the one proven formula in Australia is women's magazines. And we've also obviously infused it with the financial concept, so it's not just light and fun. It also has all this information to back it up, and the whole point is to make it really to not make it intimidating. So because people, even if you only read those magazines sitting in the doctor's surgery, you understand the format and they're not very difficult. And that's really what we want to convey with this book, that it doesn't have to be difficult or intimidating.
And since the book was released, I know that you feel really there's been a groundswell of interest in this, and it's actually opening plenty of new doors for you. And 2010, you say, is about the call to action.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience having the book out there, because a lot of women who've been working in this area have got in touch. So I think women, one thing that was interesting in writing was Flirting with Finance. We wrote it because we realised women switch off when they start talking about finance, and just because we write a book and try and make it fun, you're still trying to get a book to an audience you've already established isn't that interested in what you're writing about. So I think the next step is setting up this group that is making the learning more interactive. So we're creating a 10-month web series so women can get together in a group, because I think women really love learning together. We're getting experts across a whole lot of different fields who will be explaining concepts to women that can be downloaded from the web, and get girls together in a book club type environment. We've got some champagne sponsors on board, and just for girls to learn with their girlfriends, get together once a month and then go away and look into different ideas and take them through the steps. So at the end of the year, they've got all this knowledge. And so that's really, sometimes having a book you might know you should read or you'd like to read it, but just sits on the bookshelf for a while, whereas if you've got this appointment with all your friends once a month, then that's really making that next step. And we're also running a lot of seminars and events that women can come along to, because that's a more active way of learning.